while I was learning hypnosis, we'd do a class and then we'd practice it on each other. And I completely fucked this bloke's brain up because I hypnotized him and told him that he was being chased by a 40-foot vagina that was perioding all over him. Right. And he actually, I mean, we stayed in touch, and he said, "You really have fucked with my brain," because he can't get it out of his head. And it's disturbing because he said it's
I
totally
don't think I'll
weird.
get
Why
out
would
of
you
mine.
do that? Why would you do that? Anyway, that's just my sense of humour. But when I've been working with people under hypnosis, I wouldn't do that. But the rule of thumb is this. If I was to help you, I have to step into your world.
Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks, led by Director Carl Smith. Their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight's a bit different. Normally I talk to veterans. Tonight I'm not. I'm talking to David LeGrys. I did say that right, didn't I?
Close, LeGrys.
LeGrys. Right, forgive me for that. I'm really sorry. Should have asked before, I shouldn't have really. So
It's
David's a world champion masters cyclist. He's competed all over the world in lots and lots of different levels and is now a coach in Mallorca, I believe it is. He is also a proponent of a neuro-linguistic programming, which we'll talk about later on, if I can manage to say it correctly. First of all, David, thanks. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for coming on it without people volunteering or pester. Yeah, so it's the same questions type of thing I'm going to ask you what I'd normally ask anyone who's on the podcast. So normally we start off like people's life, early life, and what led them into the path that they have chosen. So if you just like give us a background of yourself, where you grew up, what it was like, and what made you do what you did.
Sure. Well, I was born in 1955, so I'm coming up to the grand old age of 80, 70. I'm from a working class background. Both my parents were racing cyclists, so I'm kind of genetically there already. But they packed up their racing as soon as they had my sister and myself. But my father got racing again, and that's where my cycling career started at the age of 12. I was inspired by a film that I saw about a runner. I think his name was Jim Thorpe, an American guy, and he got all his medals stripped because he won the Olympics, and because he turned professional in a baseball game, he got all his medals stripped. But it really inspired me. The feeling of him winning that gold medal somehow sunk into me, and I was on a mission from the age of 12 that I wanted to be a world champion or somebody that's going to, get. It's not so much a lot of publicity, but just feel good about yourself. So it's been a weird journey. If you look at the likes of other cyclists that you might have heard of, Sir Bradley Wiggins and Sir Chris Hoy, who Bradley Wiggins I have coached in the past, and I know Chris very well. Their career paths are what I would say pretty normal in the sense that they jump on their bike and progressively get better and better. And a lot of people that are successful on the back of it, it's down to good luck, because if you get some bad luck, it's going to put you back. And this is where I come into play. I've had a lot of bad luck. A lot of it was self-induced. I didn't realize until later in life that I had mental issues, and I was trying to explain it, and a forensic police officer said to me, it's actually quite common. It's like a tick in your brain, like Tourette's, but it's not like what you see or hear. So I don't say crazy things and burst out doing odd things, but I have these dark thoughts. I could be standing up the top of a skyscraper and I want to jump off, but it's just a thought. Never carried out. even escalated into me behaving really weird. When I was young, I got my driving license when I was 15 because I was in New Zealand at the time. I'll come back to that. And I was only a kid when I learnt to drive, but I used to play chicken. I'd go across the other side of the road and completely reckless. I'm pretty ashamed of what I did, and I don't know how I got away with it. And I drive toward. I had no fear. It's a combination of being
Yeah.
absolutely crazy, reckless, and no fear. And it's weird because if I watch myself doing it, I just think, what?
Almost psychopathic.
Yeah. And funny enough, there's a psychiatrist called Dr. Stephen Peters. He wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox, and it's all about the chimp taking over your emotional brain. And he can actually understand my thoughts. And because I think I was controlled by my chimp through most of my life until I realised. This is where I met Kane and got involved with NLP much later in life. But going back to my younger days, my ambitions, all I wanted to do was race at school. I wasn't an academic. I was average. I wasn't stupid, but I definitely wasn't academic. I didn't get it. I didn't want to study. I just wanted to go out after school and ride my bike. And that's what I did. And that's when when I left school at 15, my family went to New Zealand. We emigrated there. And the first thing my father said is that you got to go and get yourself a trade. And that's what it was like back then, And I did. I become a apprentice carpenter. And I built houses. And in New Zealand, because of the earthquakes, all the houses are made of wood. A carpenter would pretty much build a whole house, right from the foundations to the floor, to the walls, to the roof. The only thing they didn't do was the electrics and the plumbing. But that made me stronger because it was pretty manual. The workmen, it's very racist then, but didn't realise I was a pom. I was a pommy bastard. And I did all the shitty work. I had to clean the dungy out. I got my own back because if boss went in the dungy, I used to nail it up so he couldn't get out and do all sorts of tricks to him. When I finally did my apprenticeship, it was common back then for the boss to sack you because when you become a tradesman, the men still treated you like an apprentice. So it was a common thing to sack the apprentice. Yeah. And on the day that I was going to go, rather than him sack me, I brought this big cream cake. And when we had what we call smoko, our tea break, I called him over. I said, boss, I got a present for you. And I whacked his face in this cake. And I said, do you want me to go now or finish the day off? And he said, fuck off now, you're done. So that was it. That was me now. And I've very rarely touched a hammer and saw since, although I've done bits and bobs. But from then on, I was on the road becoming a bike rider. And all I wanted to do was go back to the UK so that I was involved with racing at top level throughout Europe. New Zealand's it's on its own in the middle of the Pacific. And you can go so far in New Zealand and that's it. Whereas in Britain, you can go as good as you can get in Britain and then go across to Europe. And that's what I did. And I travelled all over Europe. And I think when I look back at what's going on now, a lot of sports are funded by the lottery. And I know that cycling get 30 million a year, 30 million. On top of that, They will probably get another 10 or 15 million on sponsorship on top of that. So the riders are very well looked after. They've got mechanics, they've got head shrinks, they've got gophers, they've got coaches, they've got scientists, you name it, they've got it. All they've got to do is turn up and ride their bike, which is all supplied anyway. With me, I was signing on the Dole. That was my sponsor, Dole Money. And when I did what we called the Grand Prix circuit, and what that involves is going around all of Europe, from Paris. There's 3 Grand Prix in Paris, for instance, and jump on a train, head off to Germany and do a couple, Hanover, Berlin, and then on to Denmark and do some, and that sort of thing. So when I turned up at British Cycling Federation head office, they gave me a big bag of money. And it had Corona, marks, francs, lira, all mixed up, all this money in different currencies, and a big load of train tickets. And I don't know, back then, the international travel, you're on your own. And if you're on the wrong train, that's you done, you got, and it's all about connecting other trains. I did all this on my own, carrying my bikes, my wheels, my luggage. I used to sort of bunny hop my bikes and my luggage, go back and go and get more and sort of work my way to the station and then onto the train. And there was one occasion when I got conjunctivitis. I was travelling from Denmark to Italy and I got conjunctivitis and I could hardly see. It was a really sunny day and I was squinting. and I was leaning out the window as the train was pulling up at Milano or Milan North. I needed to go to the central Milan. And as we pulled away, I looked at the platform and I saw a bike and a load of cases. And I looked there and I thought, that's my bike. And I went on to go to Milan. And I had the organizer had planned on meeting me there to take me to the velodrome to race. And I'd explained that my bikes were at Milan North. And he said, don't worry, I'll take you to the velodrome and we'll arrange somebody to go and pick them bike and wheels and cases up. So when I got to the velodrome, the races, because I was late anyway, the racing was about to start. So they held the meeting up for me. Eventually, we started an hour late and I got my bike and I had to put it all together, pump my tyres up. I had no warm up and I got straight on the track and rode in heat 1 and I got absolutely trashed by the other guy who beat me in the first round. But I wasn't surprised, no warm up and I was a bit stressed. And I got a communique and it got a list of races, what's going on during the day. And I noticed that, there was something like 20 heats in this sprint race. And I was in the first heat, but when I looked down in heat 15, my name was there again. And the Italians had screwed up the program and I was down twice. So I was allowed to get up again and race the first round. Does that make sense? So I've lost heat 1 because they cocked up. I got up in heat 15 and I won it. So I'm through to the next round. Now, you get it in rowing. If you lose, you've got what we call a repechage, and that's a loser's race to get you back into the competition. So being as I lost my race in the first heat, I was allowed to ride the repechage and I won it. So that means I now go back into the competition. And guess who I raced in the next round? Me.
Yourself? No.
They've really screwed up because I'd won the repechage and I'm then facing myself and I'm sitting on the bike, being held up, and they're calling me over and I'll say I'm here. And they're all going like this. And they wouldn't admit that they'd cocked up. So I had what we called a ride over because the other David LeGrys didn't turn up and he got fined, would you believe? And they gave me the fine. I said, I can't pay that. It's not me because I just raced. And they were just, it was bonkers. But it was bonkers back then. And if you compare that with what's going on now, for a start, I wouldn't be jumping on trains, going everywhere with a bag full of money and a bag full of tickets, travelling on my own. Now they even take their own mattresses and pillows so that when they arrive at the hotel, they've got their own bed and they got their own chef. The chef will take over the hotel restaurant. So they got their home cooking, the menu that they want. They got the mattresses that they sleep on at home and they got their pillows. And it's completely different now.
It just shows how much, just shows you.
And this is why they're, well, yeah, I mean, money's no object. It is all about money in a lot of things. If you've got the money, you're going to be able to press on. But within all this going on and riding backwards and forwards in Europe, doing the Grand Prix, I had a hell of a lot of crashes. And we're talking serious crashes.
No one there to look after you either.
No, not when I was abroad. When I was at home, yes. But when you're racing in Lycra and you're travelling at 45 mile an hour, you might as well be riding naked because the Lycra just melts. Somebody said to me, what's it like crashing? I said, well, imagine putting a pair of shorts on and a T-shirt and then get in a car and get it up to 45 mile an hour and just jump out. I said, that's what it's like. And it brings it to reality. And you pretty much get your collarbones, arms. I've broken practically every bone in my body. I know there's going to be more, but they take a lot of healing. And when you're young, you actually get over it quicker and it catches you up later in life. I broke my back 3 times. That was in the Commonwealth Games when we got a silver medal. I crashed out in the tandem, which we would have won in the tandem sprint, but we had an unfortunate crash. Ended up in hospital with a busted back, but because we was in the final, it's a bit like boxing. It's a knockout competition. And there's only 2 of us left in the final, riding off for first and second. Now, as we crashed out, we got awarded the silver because we managed to get to the final because I wasn't able to get up. That was me done. These crashes had that was my life, was crashing, getting over it, racing, crashing. And it's a sprinter's, it's not unusual in some ways because a sprinter's mentality is almost like psycho. Just for that moment, you if you're racing against other guys and there's nowhere to go, you just push yourself through the gap. And we got no brakes on the track, and it's either going to work or it's going to end up messy. And as I said earlier, I got no fear then. It's different now. When you're older and you've done all that, you just sort of think, if I was in that same situation now, I'd back up. I'd back off. I'd let it go. Even if it means giving up the win, I wouldn't bother, because I know what it's like and I don't want to hurt myself again. And the older you get,
but you're right. When you're younger, you just don't. You don't see the consequences of your actions sometimes. And that's in anything. I mean, we look back now. I look back at some of the idiotic things I've done as a young soldier. Especially like out on the beer and stuff like that, where you've lost your inhibitions anyway. But even like, I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to incriminate myself. But it's like you don't have any fear when you're younger, because you don't see that. You don't look at the future like you. How can I put it? You don't look at the future like you do now. Look at the past.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I don't think anybody does look at the future in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no responsibilities,
I mean, if you've got
no
wife and
planning,
kids at
you
home
just
and a job,
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is just like that.
Yeah, different.
But it's like that on steroids. It's another level with me. I was almost, you could almost call me a nutter, but I had some good wins. Now, I've been British champion, I've been European champion, I've been World Masters champion. I've had a lot of success, but a lot of knockbacks. And when I reflect, I wrote a book, Enfant terrible, which means a terrible child. It's only when I wrote my book that I realised the mistakes that I made and how, in some ways, how out of control I was. And especially with these demons going on, I would get overly nervous before a big race to the point of no sleep. Can you imagine training for the British and for the last 6 months and peaking, you're in the top form, only to waste it all away by having no sleep and getting up in the morning absolutely drained. And it's just like, why me? And it didn't stop there, and it almost made me ill every time I raced. And I had to learn how to deal with it. The coaches back then didn't have a clue. They'd just say, get over yourself, or, well, I never got nervous when I was racing like that. It's good to have nerves, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's whether you go into battle, you need adrenaline, but you can't be over stressed, because that has a knock-on effect on the way your body behaves and the way I behaved. And I lost a lot of races. I actually think that I would have podiumed in the elite worlds if it wasn't for injuries or my head. I know I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but I do know I was that good. But I never really made it past being pretty good to really good. There was always a setback, a crash. Bad luck, or my head. And that got me into coaching, because I actually wanted to help other people, so that I could relate to, if somebody's got an issue going on in their head, I could help them. That's where I met Kane, because he fixed me. I had a big race in Australia and I was falling to bits, and somebody said to go and see him and get this NLP. I said, what's that? And it's neuro-linguistic programming. And what that is, it reframes the way your body behaves and thinks. It doesn't take the problem away. It's like half full, half empty. It's the same thing, but you're looking at it a different way. And I got Kane to install what we call an anchor or a trigger, based on all the successes when we was having a chat about what I'd done and everything that I'd done in a positive way, and I was proud of what I did. We anchored that. So when I went away to Australia, I hit my anchor when I was in a stressy situation, and I changed. And I was so impressed with it that I studied it. I become a practitioner myself, so that I could actually help other cyclists when I was coaching later on in life. But that was later. But leading up to that, I'm on my third marriage now. Probably won't last long after what I said to her. It's just I didn't mean it. But yeah, I mean, my first wife, she was quite young, and I was a professional cyclist. And I will admit that I was a rubbish husband. I feel ashamed of the way I treated her. She was just the cook, used and abused her. I just wanted to ride my bike. She liked the attention because I was getting it, and she was tagged on. But after a while, she wanted the attention herself. Plus, we fell out because I wasn't treating her nice, and I admit that. I know normally there's two sides to the story, but I think on this occasion there's one side, and I fully admit 100% is all me. So it ended up obviously in a divorce, and
that's with hindsight, you know.
yeah,
That's with hindsight and the knowledge that you had something wrong, you know. So maybe it's that.
there is that, and it actually broke my heart. I couldn't take it. I mean, I lost 2 stone within 3 weeks. I didn't eat nothing at all. I just drank water, and I remember because I couldn't sleep because I was so upset. I remember going out. It was during one summer. My wife hadn't left me that long, but I was still in bits, and it was about 4, half 4 in the morning. It was light, and I thought I'll go out on my bike. And I was going up this hill and I was crying my eyes out as I was pedaling. And there was a milkman delivering, and he looked at me, he said, "It ain't that hard, is it?" I was crying because I was going uphill, which was quite funny, really. But it took me a long time to get over that. And I ended up going to Australia to live there. I had a mate over there, and I thought I'd start a new life. And that's when I started to get involved with doing land speed records. We was going to do a record in South Australia on a salt lake called Lake Gardner, and had all that sorted out, and it fell through. When I came back to Britain, because I had to get some stuff to fuel some stuff that we needed to get from the UK, and my visa had run out, so I needed to come home and go out again. When I came back, my friend said, "Don't bother coming back. The sponsorship has fallen through. The record attempt's off." So I did it over here, and I got Tom Walkinshaw. I don't know if you heard of him. He used to drive Jaguars and Rovers.
Yeah, he did he drove around the TT in a Rover 820.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he drives sports cars, touring cars as they call them. And to get the sponsorship for this record, I needed 100 grand. Because we've got to have a special built bike, we've got to have a car, we've got to have a runway. I don't know how, where we're going to get a runway. And I spent a year trying to get sponsorship, and it all fell flat. And I remember going down south somewhere, and I was talking to a guy in the pub about raising money for the record attempt and telling him the story. And I turned around and knocked this guy's beer over. And I apologised, said, "I'll buy you another beer." And I bought him another beer, and he gave me a card. And he was the CEO of Wincanton Transport. He said, "I think we might be able to do a deal here." I said, "You're joking." And we did. I saw him the next day. He made an appointment to see him, and he gave me 100 grand, or a cheque, just like that. I mean, how easy was that? Knock a bloke's beer over, and I end up getting 100 grand. So it was onward and forward with the record attempt. And I had a guy looking after me that did all the business side of things. And he managed to persuade the Ministry of Transport to hold up the opening of the M42 that runs around Birmingham, and hold it back for a day, so that I could use it. We had Tom Walkinshaw on board as well, and he donated his Rover Vitesse V8 race car with a shield on the back for me to sit behind. So I was, behind that. And a driver called Win Percy, who was the European touring car champion of that decade. Basically, we just rocked up and did it. The first attempt, I hit 89 mile an hour, but I wasn't close enough to the car. I needed to be right on it. And so we had to, and I got blown out the back. So we did another attempt. And it was we got up to 100 mile an hour on the next one. And then I had to change gear because we're going faster. I need a bigger gear. And then we did it again, and I got up to 110 mile an hour. And then I thought, right, we're going to open up the gas now. We're going to go for 135 mile an hour, which would be back then the world record. I was ready for it. But we're doing this on the blooming motorway. It's got hills and bends. The guy that held the record did it on Bonneville salt flats. It's a hell of a lot different than doing it on a windy, very M42 in the winter. Yeah, I had leathers on. I was like a motorbike rider, full helmet, leathers. Again, no fear. My parents were there. My first wife was there, and they were shitting buckets looking at it. It's horrendous when you see the video.
I mean, how close do you have to be in the car? Because I've seen videos of it, and you're talking inches away, aren't you?
My bike was specially built I'll have to explain this so that you understand. The front of the bike, below the handlebars, is called the head tube that attaches the forks, front forks. And I had a bar projecting out the front like that, at the front, and then another bar like that welded to the front of the bike. That was my brake. And on the back of the car, in the windshield, they had a horizontal bar that I bumped into. So I had
Right.
to hit the bar.
Wow.
And that's how close I was. And that was because I got no brakes. I'm going down the motorway at 110 mile an hour, no brakes. And you can't just pull out the slipstream because I don't know if you've done 100 mile an hour and just stuck your head out the window, it just blow it off. So you've got to slow down with the car.
Yeah.
And the only way of slowing down, because didn't have disc brakes then, you had just normal brakes and they would have melted. And so we used that as a brake. And this driver, Wynne Percy, he was a good racing driver. And he pulled me up within 500 metres of that last attempt. So we set it all up, changed the gear for 135 mile an hour, and then it pissed down with rain, and it was game over. And I really lashed down like torrential, and it was really annoying because I was up for it. But having said that, where the timing was set up for them to capture my speed, like a radar trap, it was on a bend. That's the only flat bit of motorway that they had, and all the press and the TV were there purposely because it was a bit of a corner, and now it's good TV in it. If I fell off on that corner, if I'd have done that 135 mile an hour, I wouldn't have got round that bend. I'd have killed myself. And everyone was relieved that I wasn't, because I was so pumped up. I'm doing it, and they were saying, no, it's good. Don't do it, because they didn't want me to do it. And they were begging me not to do it, even though it's lashing it down. And it wouldn't have been a good idea because the road was actually flooded because it was torrential rain, and I would have been aquaplaning. It would have been dangerous. So unfortunately for me, I had to leave it at 110 mile an hour. And it wasn't until Guy Martin come along and broke it. I helped him. I coached him for that. We was on TV on one of his speed programs, and he did it on Pendine Sands up in Wales on the flat sands there behind a racing truck, and that was mental because the amount of wind, pulling you along, the vacuum behind that truck was amazingly going to make it a lot easier for him. But he actually fixed it because when he did his last attempt, when they downloaded the GPS, because it comes in segments, he'd only done 108 mile an hour, right? And that was his last attempt. He'd had a few goes and he screwed up each go because he wasn't sitting close enough, which was a surprise because he was bottling it. And he's a crazy motorbike rider. He's a TT rider. And you know how crazy they are. And he was bottling it on a bike, doing over 100 mile an hour, which I found a bit weird. And I kept saying, you got to sit close. I mean, really close. Yeah. And he didn't. Anyway, this one, he hit 108 and he was getting a bit tired. And we sat behind the car. We're being filmed by the TV crew. And one of his scientists, they were on their laptop. And they said, you've actually done 112 mile an hour, Guy. And he'd get pulling all these numbers up. And they ratified it. And then after we went home, them segments don't lie. It'll peak. And say you peaked at 108. That's where it peaked. You can't make up 112 mile an hour, but they somehow did. So he got awarded the record. I don't know how it got passed, but he did. But that fueled me I wanted to do 200 mile an hour in Australia. That's what I wanted to do on a bicycle. And it's very doable if you get the aerodynamics right and with the car, get the windshield right and get the right bike and the right on a salt flat. I could have done it then. And because of that fueled me to. But my health deteriorated. I had all sorts of problems. I had open heart surgery and my heart had given up on all the stress I'd given it. My mitral valve was not working. I was getting breathless. I was training through it. I was racing, and any time I got off a race, I was gasping for air. But what I didn't tell you, when my first wife left me, I started smoking. And I put it down. I stopped smoking by then, but I put it down to smoking. So I kind of managed it, but didn't realise that actually the chamber of my heart, because my valve wasn't working, the valve kind of works like that. And because it wasn't working properly, the blood was going back into the chamber and then getting evaporated and going into my lungs, and which is why I would coughing and breathless. And it's actually quite dangerous. And I was training to do a world record in Mexico. And I remember my wife, I come back from one of the training sessions and I was bad. I was quite ill. I was grey, ashen, and breathless. And where we were going in Mexico was 2,000, 3,000, I don't know, feet above. It was altitude. And we was going for a world record.
Yeah.
Not a paced one, like a human on my own. And Tracy goes, all right, oh, you'll be all right. Off you go. But I wasn't all right. And one of the guys I coach is a cardiologist, and he's in my book. He's Dr. Nigel, I call him. Very nice guy, bike rider, but also a cardiologist. And he's seen me race, and he said, I want to see you. And he done a test on me. He said, you got a heart murmur, how long you had that? I said, well, I don't know. You know, I've been going to the doctors for the last 4 years, telling them I've got breathing issues, and they said I've got exercise-induced asthma, GP. And they kept sent me to breathing clinics and specialist respiratory doctors. And in the end, they concluded that I had a breathing disorder, which basically means they don't know what's wrong with me. Couldn't name it.
Yeah.
But what was wrong with me is my heart was packing up and they didn't spot it. And if it wasn't for Dr. Nigel, wouldn't be talking to you now. So nearing the time I was going to Mexico, I got a phone call. I was with my wife in the car and it was on speaker. And it was a guy called Frank Wells, who was a cardiologist, surgeon at Papworth. Dr. Nigel had arranged, he's a colleague, he's got me onto Papworth. And Frank Wells phoned me up and says, what are you doing Saturday? I said, I'm flying to Mexico. And he said, well, if you want to come back in the box, I wouldn't go. And he said, can you come in Papworth tomorrow? I went, right. He said, we're going to, and he went, I kind of knew what he was going to say. And he explained, you know, we're going to split open your chest and we're going to put you on a life support machine. You're going to stop the heart and the life support machine will be taking over the blood supply. And we're going to collapse your lungs and the breathing machine will breathe for you, like not using your lungs. I don't know how that works. So there I was, completely weren't ready for it. I'm not rushed, but I ended up going to Papworth. I said to my wife, see you later. I'll be fine. Don't even worry about visiting me. I'll be out in a few days. And it was a long journey for her. It was a 3-hour journey to get there from where we lived. I said, look, when I'm ready to come home, I'll give you a bell. Of course, it wasn't like that. The night of the operation, before I lost my bottle, all of a sudden I realised this is life or death. Because up until then I was in cuckoo now. You just brushed over me. Yeah, heart surgery. Yeah, where you go. And then I started, not panic, but I started getting all upset. And what made it nice, the surgeon come round late at night and he said, he's done over 1,000 of what he's doing to me, repairs for the mitral valve. And he hasn't lost anyone. He said, you're all right. And he calmed me down. So I went to surgery and Tracy came to see me 6.5 hours or whatever. And she got a phone call to say that I'm all right. And would you like to come and see your husband? So she drove all the way up and I'm still in recovery. I'm still on the tubes and the breathing machine. And they got my heart, they took me off the heart thing. And they got my heart going. Do you know how they get the heart going? They flick it and it gets going again.
Oh.
So they got the heart going and they closed me up. They wired up the sternum, closed me up. And by this time, Tracy had arrived and I still had a thing down my throat for the breathing. And they have to take it out, but I'm semi-conscious from the anaesthetic and you have to start breathing on your own. They can't just take it out because you consciously don't know that you've got to breathe. And they're encouraging you to breathe. And all I can hear, if you can imagine being half awake, half asleep, comatose, is David, come on, Dave, you've got to breathe. You've got to breathe. Excuse me, quickly. And I can hear this, David, breathe. Then all of a sudden, ding, 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 cardiac arrest. And the crash team were coming in. David, we think we've lost him. And I'm still thinking, bloody hell, I'm dying, right? Completely calm. And I'm going, David, wake up. Come on, breathe. You got to breathe. Oh, my God. And they can hear all this running about and stuff. Next minute, I come to and I'm in the ward and my wife had been up with me most of the night or whatever and her head was laying on, she fell asleep with her head on my bed. And I come to and I was stroking her hair and I'm like, what happened? She said, well, you won't believe this, but there's a bloke next to you called Dave. And it was him. It was another Dave. I thought it was me.
Oh,
Dave.
wow.
Yeah. But the good news is he survived. He was okay. But I really thought, I mean, you couldn't make it up, really. So
No, bloody hell. Oh.
it was a moment.
That's unfair, man. That's unfair. You knew the punchline of that, and it's unfair because I was on tenterhooks then.
Yeah, I know. So it was a funny outcome. But the road to recovery was horrible. They said I'll be deconditioned. And what that means is that you got no ounce of fitness. And I didn't believe that we'd have everything, your muscle memory, your fitness memories wiped. And it's just gone to the point that even if you just stood up out of the chair, you'd be breathless and clinging on to the side of the chair thinking you're going to pass out. It's that bad. So it's quite a long
Oh,
recovery. But during the recovery, I made all these crazy videos. One was with me talking to the Grim Reaper. One was me doing flower. Do you remember the Monty Python flower arranging with the Gumbies? You take a bunch of flowers, you put them in a vase, yeah, get in. And I did one of them
yeah.
sketches. I did all sorts of videos. Another one with me walking naked through a field with snorkels and flippers and goggles, and that got me pneumonia. That did. I ended up back in hospital, and when I was there, the doctors couldn't believe what you. And I showed him the video because I videoed it. It's, why are you walking around naked in the field with you? But things started to. I was doing weird things. I was crying my eyes out. Anything that I could,
Hmm.
I could be watching TV and I'd start crying. So I asked Dr. Nigel, I said, why am I behaving like this? It's a bit weird, weirder than I normally are. And he said that when they stop your heart, this is actually quite interesting. When they stop your heart and collapse your lungs, the brain is not getting a pulse and it's not breathing. And the brain gets quite confused. And then 6.5 hours later, it gets a pulse. And again, the brain's going, hang on, there's a pulse. So it's confused and it affects different ways, different people. Some go completely bonkers like I do, others forget things, stuff like that. So it was quite an experience getting over that. But I made medical history, being me, which is quite stupid. Within 5 months, I was racing again. In fact, my first race, I got third in the London Olympic
Bloody hell.
Velodrome, which is crazy. But that really was my road to destruction because I shouldn't have done that. I came back too quick. I actually did a podcast a couple of years. Well, it's not so much a podcast. It's a Zoom session with a load of guys that I coached. I did a discussion on the difference between being motivated and driven. If you was to succeed, you need to be motivated. There's no denying about that. But motivation can be killed instantly. You've only got to have something like a death in the family or some real bad luck or a crash, and all of a sudden your motivation's gone. And then we switch to somebody that's driven. Right? So when you're driven, you're programmed not to stop. So these driven people, and I'm driven, you don't understand stop. You don't understand recovery, which is again an explanation to why I behaved the way I did after serious crashes. And I was explaining that it's when you're doing something, whether it be in business or sport, driven's good because you are programmed not to quit. The old Rocky thing, you get knocked down. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. And that's driven.
Yeah.
But it can also be your worst enemy because when you're having a serious recovery and you're not listening to your body, because I'm programmed to get over this, and there's a point where you can't man up, you can't just press on, you've got to back off, and I found that quite difficult. I didn't understand going easy, and even now because I've got ongoing health issues. I've had to pack up racing. I've had to pack up. Well, I didn't mention my running, did I? I've run marathons. I used to run, yes, dear. So I couldn't get over myself at first because I love running. I love being fast on a bike. I was a sprinter, racing behind a car at 110 mile an hour. All stopped. The health got me in the end. It bit me in the bum. Everything caught up. If I had my life all over again, I wouldn't really change it apart from one thing. And that will be when I crashed, I should have recovered properly, but I was too impatient. And it's all right doing that once or twice, but if you're having multiple injuries throughout your whole career, that's not good. The body's going to compensate all the time and fix you, but eventually it just collapses. Yeah. So I'm riddled with arthritis, and I've got still got ongoing heart problems. I'm due to go in and have an ablation sometime. I'm also due to go in and have another spinal fusion. They fused 3 of my vertebrates, and they're going to go again. That's due in May.
Jesus
So I'm
Christ.
not out of the woods yet. You know, so lots of surgery's been going on.
Jesus.
I think one of my most painful ones was I had hicycle. Have you heard of hicycles? It's when you get fluid in your testicles and they blow up like a grapefruit. All right. So you have to walk around your balls. You can't walk like that. You have to walk around your testicles.
I shouldn't be
So
laughing.
yeah, but and it's also you don't walk, you clang. It's like donging, donging, and the weight of it. And I had to have this surgery to have them either drained or cut this gland that was producing the fluid. So I said, "I'll get rid of it, cut it." So they did, and the pain from the recovery was not good. The surgeon that did it wasn't useful because I said, "Is it going to hurt?" He said, "You just pain management." That's all he said, pain management. And incidentally, tramadol, paracetamol, whatever, didn't work anyway. It was that painful.
Imagine it was.
It was horrible. And I had to wear this sock to put on that supported it's like a jock strap, but to put it on I nearly pass out. Putting it on is horrendously painful. My wife doesn't do sympathy. You're such a drama queen, bless her. And that was just part of it. But then I got is that right, Tracy? Hematomin, a blood clot, and they swelled up again. And I was about to go to Mallorca to run a cycling training camp that weekend. And I got checked in to see the urologist, and he said that he's a big Texan guy, about 10 foot tall. Yo, what we got here then? Right? And he looked at my balls. He went, wow, we're going to have to drain them. So, okay. So I'm laying there and I got, like the women have when they're on these stirrups with their legs apart and their feet up in the air when they're having a baby. I'm up there. I got everything hanging out and I'm sitting there waiting. All of a sudden, this young trainee nurse comes in. She could only be 18 and she's holding this tray with a towel on it with a syringe that big and a needle that big, shaking like a leaf. And all she saw was the frontal of my balls right in her face. And then this doctor come in and it looked at, have you seen the film Hostel? When they got this uniforms, they're all masked up in a rubber suit and big long rubber gloves, like someone doing a slaughterhouse. And this Texan looked just like that. He come out and he ran, right. And he said, we're going in. So he goes in with a syringe in my balls and he hit one of my testicles. I screamed. He went, oops, sorry about that. And anyway, he started draining, and this poor nurse was holding this bowl, and he was squirting this greeny goo into it, out of my testicles, into this bowl. And this poor nurse was looking at it, and I was screaming as well. No anaesthetic. He just went straight in after hitting my testicle, which wasn't very nice. But he drained them. And in actual fact, touch wood, they've been fine. They've shrunk back to normal size. And I did go to the training camp, and I know a guy got a bike shop and he got me one of them sit up and beg bikes, like a shopping bike, and I was able to ride that, and it had a nice comfy saddle. But I mean, my training camps, I've got 10, sometimes 15 staff that help me. They do ride guides, so I don't have to go out and do the rides if I don't want to anyway. But yeah, so what can I say with health issues?
I'm sat here and anyone who's just listened to that has probably just spent the last 5 minutes crossing the legs and wincing, and I think I'm in a cold sweat. To be honest,
it wasn't nice. The thing is, it went on and on and on. All this, it just seemed to be one thing after another. And I can pinpoint when it happened 13 years ago. How long have we been married, Chase? 12 years? Yeah. And I knew you a year before, 2 years. So I had a serious crash in Portugal and I collapsed both lungs. It's called a traumatic pneumothorax. 2010. Traumatic. It's in the World Masters in Portugal. And I crashed out in a points race. It's a big race. There's a crash in front of me and I went piling into it. And it wasn't, a lot of pneumothorax is done through puncturing from a rib. But this was traumatic. So the impact sucked all the air out of my chest. It's a bit like a lot of people died in
Yeah.
the war from bomb explosions, from sucking the air out of their chest because it's like a
Yeah.
cavity, not the blast itself. And I had that. But luckily, as I was rolling around on the floor, my other lung inflated itself. So I was left with one collapsed lung. And I was taken to a hospital in Portugal, and they didn't speak any English. And I don't know if you know, Portuguese is a language on itself. It's not like Spanish or Italian. Portuguese is just
Yeah.
different. So no communication. I was in intensive care. A friend of mine who I was racing with travelled out together. He stayed on to stay with me while the World Championships had finished. Everyone had gone home except my friend Dave. He saw me in intensive care, and he's only allowed to see me for half an hour. And he said, his words, he thought I was going to die because I was on what they call a chest drain, and it was going wrong, and the air was escaping, and it was blowing all my face up, everything, and I went blind. And I remember him coming round. I said, I can't see you. And what it was, my cheeks were puffed up so much it closed my eyes, and I was having to pull my eyes down like that to see. Now, I wasn't going blind. It's just that my face puffed up to such an extent I couldn't see anything. And I couldn't answer. We were both
Bloody hell.
asking the doctors, we need an interpreter. What's going on? And I was in there for a week, intensive care. It might have been, as far as my head was concerned, a day. I was just laying there on my back for a week, not knowing what was going on. And the days and nights just went. And I saw my mate now and again for half an hour, which I can't remember. Then I eventually ended up in a ward, and it was a 3-man ward. It's quite small, but there was only one guy there, and he spoke English. And so I was in this small men's ward, and because he spoke English, and I've been there 2 or 3 days, and I hadn't had a dump, right? And because I was full of painkillers, it constipates you. And then I had this urge. I told the nurse I need to go, and they gave me a suppository, and then you got to wait, and then it erupts, and I said I'm ready, right? So this guy was very nice. He said, right, I'm gonna go. I'll leave you to it. The nurse comes in with one of these things you sit on. No, it wasn't a commode. It's a bedpan and one sheet of toilet paper. One sheet. Now, bearing in mind, I got 2 weeks of shit ready to come out, and we're talking hospital shit. It's not very nice. It's very gooey. It's it's none of this like sliced off. It's very messy. So I'm trying to balance, if you can mark this, and I got this tube coming out my chest, and I'm balancing, and the bed was like, no, I'm trying to hold myself up, and it just dropped. All my guts just fell out to the point that I'd filled the bedpan up. So I had to push myself up so that I could not, top it up. And just as I was doing that, the door come and a guy come in with a bed. He'd just been under surgery, and they wheeled this patient in to go into the bed next door to me. And all his family were there, mum, dad, brothers and sisters. And at that point, I fell off my bedpan, and everything was covered in shit. And they're going, oh, hello, like this, saying, and I'm covered in shit, literally. And I had one piece of toilet paper. The nurse come in, because I kept buzzing. And she just said in Portuguese, I don't know what it is, but it's almost like, oh my God, and run out. 3 nurses came back and pulled the curtains, cleaned me up, changed the bed, stuff like that. So a lot of my hospital experiences have been, not the best. But that was quite an experience. And then coming home, because I had pneumothorax, I couldn't fly, so I had to come home by train. And that was a bit of a journey as well, coming all the way back from there. So where do we go from there?
So was that your last race?
No, I recovered. And by then, I was messaging a woman that I met, and I fancied her, and she worked at Debenhams, and she was in hospital at the same time as me. So we was exchanging text messages, and she had an ongoing illness, autoimmune illness, and I was laying in hospital. So we were just sort of keeping each other going. And when I got back, I wanted to hook up with her. And she was always like, oh, I can't go tonight. I'm going to the gym. I can't go tonight. I've got this or that. I could never seem to get with her. And eventually I did. And we had a drink, and I said, what do you reckon? Do you want to go out? And she said, yeah, why not? And I said, we'll play it very, take it steady. And then within a year, we got married, which is funny. But I used to coach her daughter, Molly, and that's kind of how we met in the first place, anyway. And I coached Molly. Molly's now doing a PhD in Cambridge, by the way. She's doing very well for herself. So Tracy was my third wife. I didn't mention my second wife, did I, Stella? I can come back to that. But I've been with Tracy now, although we've been married for 12 years, so we've known each other for, a bit longer than that. And I think I'd like to say she's a keeper. I'm getting funny looks, so you can see the looks I'm getting. No, but she is. She's a diamond.
You can't say
She
anything
is
else,
a
can you?
diamond. No, but the thing is, what makes it
If we
quite
go
funny...
back to,
Yeah, go on.
there's a bit of a delay between us, right?
Yeah.
And people will have to appreciate that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to the neuro-linguistic programming. If you could talk a bit about that, because it was me talking when I interviewed Ken last week. He spoke a bit about it as well, and I've heard it mentioned with people because in the aspects of doing this podcasting, I've spoke to a lot of people about mental health, and it's mainly like I spoke before we started recording. It's mainly aimed at the veterans and stuff like that, and the mental health that this came from the likes of PTSD, complex PTSD, and many other things. But one I've come across all the different types of cognitive behavioural therapy and stuff like that, which I didn't know about beforehand. But the NLP stuff's like quite new to me, and it was only because I'd heard about it from Kane the other day when I was talking to him, and he didn't explain that much about it to me. But if you could give us a bit on that and how it's helped you and changed behaviours and stuff.
Yeah. So what it is behavioural patterns. Everything that we've learned in our life, we've got coping strategies on how to deal with whatever, fear, stress. And those coping strategies might be okay or not. And the coping strategy affects the way you behave. It's not just the thinking. So if let's go on. It will make it easier for me to explain when I'm coaching. One of the fears that most cyclists or any performer, whether it be an actor or a sportsman, would be the fear of failure, the fear of losing, the fear of what people think about them. To be honest, nobody gives a shit, really, but they think that everyone's thinking bad thoughts because you're losing a race. And you behave different. You carry your body different. Somebody that's confident and hasn't got stress would be walking quite upright, and somebody that's slumped, you can just look at them and say, they're pretty stressed. So NLP is about reframing the way we behave and think. And I gave an example back there, half full, half empty, but it's more than that, because there's different types of techniques. It's out of body experiences. One of my favorites is the cinema, where we take someone to the cinema. But before I come to that, I had to do a course in hypnosis, right? And NLP hypnosis isn't deep hypnosis where you're levitating and going in a different room. Hypnosis is just different stages of relaxation. So we're just stage one. So if I was hypnotizing you, I would just calm you down, let my voice run over you, and and if there's any other noise like traffic, just absorb it. It's not going to take, I'll just calm you down, and then we'll start doing the stuff, what we're going to do. While I was learning hypnosis, we'd do a class and then we'd practice it on each other. And I completely fucked this bloke's brain up because I hypnotized him and told him that he was being chased by a 40-foot vagina that was perioding all over him. Right. And he actually, we stayed in touch, and he said, you really have fucked with my brain, because he can't get it out of his head. And it's disturbing because he said it's totally weird. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Anyway, that's just my sense of humour. But when I've been working with people under hypnosis, I wouldn't do that. But the rule of thumb is this. If I was to help you, I have to step into your world. And what that means is I can't say, right, you got to do this, all that. I got to come into your world and almost mirror you. Where the linguistic part comes in is I would talk your language. And if you said words like awesome, I would use that word instead of, that's great, which I wouldn't connect with. I need to connect with you. So there's a bit where you build a rapport up with your client to get them to talk to you, a bit like what we're doing now, and get the
Yeah.
confidence and the understanding, and I'll be taking notes on whatever, and then we'll start discussing what the issue is here. And I'm taking you. I did a guide, one of my training camps in Mallorca. I used to have the military. I had the Marines, the Army, and the RAF, and you can imagine what that was like. Especially like with the Army and the Marines, having a go at the RAF, the old Brilkey boys. Kane won't like that. But it was true. The one of the guys, the officers, a wing commander, Ed, he was a wing commander, right? And he come up to me and he said, "There's a guy," and I noticed he come down to breakfast, but he had a very long face and he was always depressed. And he said, "Can you fix him?" I said, "What's the matter with him?" And he told me he was a sniper, and he took out this guy, and he went over to check if he was dead, and he's blown all his face away. And it haunted him. And he's got his wife and kids in his pocket. And he was discharged and sent home. His marriage was breaking up, and he had a few attempts of walking in front of a train. And so somehow he held it together. And he used to ride a bike, and he come to my camp. And Ed, the wing commander, said to me, the RAF spent a lot of money on counselling and drugs and doctors. What do you reckon? Because he knew I did NLP. And I said, well, I don't know. I'll give it a go. And I said, but he's got to come to me. This is one of the things important with NLP. I can't approach you, say, look, you got to come to me. Because that means the barriers are down straight away. Because once the barriers are up, I'm not going to get through them, which is, again, why I've got to enter into your world. I had the guy come up and said, "Can you help me?" Cap in hand. I said, "Of course, I'll give it a go." And I assured him that even if it doesn't work, it won't fuck with your mind. This is all good, because all I'm going to do is reframe how you think. Like, how would you like to behave? And he would tell me how he'd like to behave as against how he's behaving now. And this is what I would work on. The thing is, he was clinically depressed. So I thought I was out of my league. And to hear his story, he had to unload everything onto me, and it drained me. It's like, I had all these problems. And you know what I did? I mean, one of the things that I learned with NLP, you can also use your sense of humour. And I said to him, "You're depressed." And he laughed. He said, "Of course I'm fucking depressed." But I got a little bit of a laugh. And I said to him, I mean, this is where it's quite funny, really. Well, not funny. I said, "That's an achievement." And he looked at me, and before he could say anything, I said, "An achievement is doing something that you're good at. And you're good at being depressed." And he laughed. And I thought, I got you here, all right. I said, "Tell me, what other achievements have you had apart from your being depressed?" And he's got a degree. He was an officer of some sort. He's done lots of successful bike rides. He wasn't a champion, but he'd do these sportive things and rallies and stuff, and he'd have good rides, where he'd come back and be proud. He's done a lot of good in his life, And I said, "How many hours a day do you spend, getting your degree?" He said, "Well, it varies, maybe a couple of hours to 4 or 5 hours. What about your cycling? And he said, a couple of hours a day." I said, "Yeah, but if you wanted to be better at anything, you probably have to put more hours into it." He said, "Well, that's possible." I said, "Well, why? You're doing pretty good, because how many hours do you think you are being depressed?" And he said, "Oh, pretty much." I said, "That's why you're good at it. You're good at being depressed. And the more you want to be depressed, so just keep focusing on." And where I'm going with this, I'm getting him to think outside the box. And he looked back and thought, "You know what? Of all the things I've achieved in life, and I made him aware that he's depressed, which was obvious, but he actually realized that he could make himself more depressed by being depressed. So he could put more into it. It's a bit like training. If you want to train harder to get better, he was doing just that. And it made him think completely different. And that's all it was. It was a discussion. Obviously, it took longer. It's more in depth, and we had fun doing it. And he was cracking up in the end. He thought it was hilarious. And the next day in breakfast, he came down with a smile on his face. And the group wing commander, he said, "What the hell have you done to him? This is a changed man." And I didn't cure him. Don't get me wrong, but I got him thinking different and he behaved different. He got his marriage back together. He had to carry on and have some more counselling, but he went there with a positive attitude rather than barriers, because that was his problem. One of my sayings is come from a song, the higher the barrier, the taller you become. You just step over them, and if they get higher, you get taller. And it's motivational talk, I know, but he needed to lower the barriers, which is what I did. And then the rest was down to the counselling. So I didn't completely cure him. I just got him to think different, think out the box. And there's many techniques. I mentioned the cinema, where they go there on their own under hypnosis. This is where they look at a screen and they can see a film of them on the screen watching their, if they're depressed and everything negative, and we try and turn the knobs up so they get really upset. The tears are coming down and they're watching this on a loop on the big screen. And I get them to step out of their body and go up to the projector room and look through the peephole and get them to watch themselves watching themselves on the screen. And then I get them to turn to the projector and I said, I want you to rip that film off and destroy it. And that's what they did. They blow it up, set fire to it, whatever. And they got another film. I said, the film on the floor, that's how you want to behave. So they get the film going, and it's all about everything that was successful, that they're in control. So we've got all the same situations, except we've changed it. And it's, instead of it being a gloomy day, it's a nice sunny day. Instead of climbing a hill, it's going downhill. You're going fast. The wind was behind you. All of this was reprogramming, right, what he was watching in the film through the peephole, watching himself. That's the out-of-body experience. And when he was ready, this takes sort of anything from 40 minutes to an hour to walk it through. When he was ready, he'd step out the projector room and go back to his body self and watch himself with the screen right in front of him. And then I'd talk him through it on a loop. And I'd say, how do you feel? And he said, I feel really good now. I like this film. I said, out of 10, how much? He said, 9, 10. I said, I want this up to 12, and we'll go through it, make it better, improve the film, make it, you can make things up to make it better. If he could maybe hear the crowd cheering him winning the race. I said, mate, but, instead of 100 people, you've got 1,000 people cheering you. You can smell the imbrication and everything's good. So we got him up to 12, and then we got him to anchor. And this is where he got the trigger. And I think he did, that was his anchor. Right. And I said, right, what we're going to do now, when you're ready, this is like 45 minutes later, I want you to get up in your own time and leave the cinema. But we're going to leave the film running so that in any time you're having a problem, you can go back to the cinema and watch that film, as well as use your anchor. And that's the cinema technique, and it's brilliant. But you can only work with people that are visual. I'm not visual. I can't, if you got me to think about me winning a race, I can't picture it. I can hear a bell, I can hear the crowd, but I can't actually run a film through my mind. But some people are visual, and they can. And that's, the visual people would work with that cinema very good. Quite an easy fix in that way. And that's all it is. You're just changing the way your approach to the way you behave by anchoring it. Once you get up to that point of, that you are managing it, not controlling it. There's two differences. It's a bit like the chimp. Go back to the chimp. If you try and control it, it will rebel. But if you manage it, send it to sleep and feed it bananas, the human brain takes over because its stress has gone down. Emotional thinking is destructive. So if it just that single thought will help a lot of people, like when you're very depressed or negative, if you just remind yourself, this is an emotional thought. It's not a human thought. It's your chimp. It does actually calm things down. You can actually, when you study it, if you see two people arguing, you can see two chimps attacking each other. How many times have you argued or said something, and then when you've calmed down, you wish you hadn't said it? And that's the chimp jumping out. And that's an emotional reaction. And it's learning to manage it, not control
I've
it.
heard, the chimp thing, or the human chimp, or the chimp brain. I've heard that mentioned before, and I find it fascinating. Really, when I look back at some of the things I've done in my life, I'd say that chimp's been around a lot more than I would like to admit.
If you understood that.
Yeah, but I think also that say someone like me in the job that we used to do and the way we were trained and stuff like that, that chimp's kind of subdued because a lot of things we don't, you're drilled into things. You think I'll rephrase that. You don't have to think at all. You don't have to think. You can just like do what you're trained to do. You almost go into autopilot.
Yeah,
And
but
then when
that's a
it's later
coping
on when you
strategy.
relax from that, but when you relax from that, that chimp can come out and cause havoc.
Yes.
And he does sometimes.
Yes. So I use a combination of the chip and NLP because I find that they work well together as well as, some people would prefer the chimp rather than NLP. Some people are receptive to that and not the other, and vice versa, or both. So it works. It helps with, if I lose my rag at home, couples argue, and Tracy, my wife, will say that's your chimp talking, and it does. You actually sort of stop and think, So it does help when you understand an emotional thought causes an emotional reaction. Most of the time, when you see something, if you're on autopilot and you're looking at me now, your chimp's not involved because you're autopilot. You've got three brains, according to Dr. Stephen Peters. You've got a computer that's run on autopilot, and that only runs on everything that's installed, as in like life. You see a car, you take no notice of it, do you, unless it's coming at you. And then you got the human brain, then you got the chimp. The chimp always takes the first thought, always, because it's stronger than the computer and the human. If your chimp has passed this to our conversation, your chimp has passed it over to your computer that's on automatic pilot, he doesn't see a problem and it passes it to the human. This is all happening in a millisecond. And the human brain is being logic and rational and talking like we're talking. If I was to say something that would really upset you, your chimp would take that over and be threatened, and there will be a reaction from you, and it might not be good. And I might have deserved that reaction because I've offended you badly, or you might have regretted it because you didn't think, you should have responded that way. So the more you understand it, I'm guilty as anyone getting upset and stressed. I do calm down, and I do realise that I'm quite often in the wrong, and I put it right, and I just talk to myself and say, I'm wrong. And if I am wrong, I will apologise, be man enough to do it. But so NLP, the neuro-linguistic program, works in many ways, as well as using the chimp paradox. I like to combine them both in some situations. It is actually quite calming.
It's a fascinating subject.
I love it.
I'm going to have to look into it more, especially the chimp side of it. I think back, it's just like, I think my chimp's won too many times.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think the more you understand
life.
that when your chip's kicking off, that it's an emotional reaction, the more you know that the human brain isn't actually doing anything because the chimp's taken over. He's what I call hijacked your head. Yeah. And if your head's been hijacked, that means your human brain's not thinking rationally. And the emotions kick off. Once you get that, it helps because you know that this isn't a human reaction. This is a chimp. It really does help. And somebody that's been really stressed, I know that I've worked with in the past, is like, they said it's like magic. They still get stressed, they still get the but they actually realise what's going on, and they go with the flow, as they say, and the chimp calms down, then the human brain kicks in, and they start rationally thinking correct. It's a good way of understanding
think about that.
how we go.
Another question I've got for you. So you run these training programs out in Mallorca.
Yeah.
Why Mallorca? Why not in the UK? Or is it just the
weather? So I started off with 10 punters, and now I peaked at nearly 200 a few years before COVID. I've got another training camp in October this year, and I got 80 so far, but I'm hoping to get about 150. So within that, I've grown it over the years. And it's organised, I organise, once they arrive in Mallorca, I organise the transfers, organise the hotel, the half board. I organise all the rides. We have, meetings every night with the staff. They're called group leaders. So there's 6 different groups. Group 1 will be the fastest group, and it'll go down to group 6, which I call the social group. There'll be people that maybe do 10 or 15 miles very leisurely and have a couple of cafe stops and loads of photographs, not so serious. So we kind of cater for everyone, and we've had some funny, good times out there. So lots of stories on training camps, but mainly because of the weather.
I can imagine.
And I used to do 3 a year,
Yeah.
April, May and October, but I'm just down to I'm kind of semi-retired really. I'm just doing 1 a year now. It's good fun.
And people, if they want to get involved in that, there's I'll point to the website when we put this out as well. So I'll put the links to your website and we'll be able to get in contact with you.
Yeah. I mean, my nickname's Legro.
So that was another question I had for you. So that was the next question. Why? Why Legro? Is it just because it's easy to say?
As a kid, nobody could pronounce my name, LeGrys. I got called LeGrys. I even went to the gym and a leg rise is when you sit in a chair and flick your legs up like that. They're leg extension, but they're also called leg rises. So I've been called Leg Rise.
Yeah.
So somebody called me Legro. And it caught on, and it's actually a brand name. I mean, you could go on Google and put Legro, and it will come up with either me or a Italian transport company called Legro. Yeah, that's all it was. It kind of just stuck.
So what's your plans for the future then?
Well, it has changed because recently, I just want to go back to a couple of years ago. I wanted always to ride Land's End to John O'Groats. It's 1,000 miles and do it in 10 days, which is 100 miles a day. And I trained for it badly because my back was playing up really bad and I'd have problems doing the mileage. I'd do about 20 or 30 miles and I'd have to, that's it. That's all I could do. And I was frustrated. It took, we were doing Zoom sessions every month when I was in the hotel, when I was in the transport and stuff like that. And we wanted to raise money for prostate cancer. So we was doing it for charity as well. And it was self-funded. We didn't use any of the sponsorship money for us. It was all self-funded. And I rode with a bunch of mates that I used to race against. And it wasn't a race. We was mates riding nice and steady from A to B. And during the training, it comes with the highs and lows. But I remember I woke up, there was a really nice sunny day and it was warm. It was an ideal day to get some decent mileage in. And I woke up and I got rheumatoid arthritis and it flared up and I could hardly move. And I felt quite unwell because part of the symptoms of rheumatoid isn't just achy joints. It affects your muscles and your immune system to a point that you can feel like you got flu or something. And going back to being driven, I'm going out. And I said to my wife, I'm going to be 5 minutes or 5 hours. I don't know. Anyway, I did it. I went out and I stopped a few times and shops and tanked up with, chocolate and drinks and everything I shouldn't have. And I wasn't going particularly fast, but I was determined that I wanted to do at least 90 miles. And there was one occasion where I'm riding along the road. And as I'm riding, we're talking 12, 13 mile an hour. I was groveling and I looked to my left.
Yeah.
And there was a bee, right, going at the same speed as me, a bumblebee, going along together. And I'm looking at this bee, and this bee gradually pulled away. And I can't believe this bee had dropped me. Right? How bad is that? That was a low point in my life. And I did get back. I was also on radio site. My wife kept phoning me and I was ignoring the calls because I was grumpy. And she was worried because I was gone 6-7 hours. But I got back, but I paid the price. I got off my bike and I'm bent over. I couldn't stand up. I was grumpy and all the rest of it. And the Land's End John O'Groats ride was coming up fast. And I had to go and see a doctor. And I said, look, I need help. And he put me on a steroid called prednisolone. And it's like a steroid that takes away the inflammatory. So that helps the arthritis and also my back. And also I was on painkillers, tramadol, and I did it on that. And every day, apart from one, it pissed down. And I'm talking biblical rain. I got a video of us going through Scotland, headwind, hailstones, and we got battered from day one. Can you imagine doing 100 miles? You're going out the hotel and it's lashing it down before you even start freezing. And this is in July. And this black cloud was following us all the way up north. We'd sit back at 10 o'clock at night, watch the news and the weather and go to bed to sleep. And yep, there's that cloud. We're off to Carlisle tomorrow and it's pissing down all day, you know, and so on and so on. But we did it. We got to Land's End eventually. Believe it or not, the last 20 miles, the sun come out and we had a tailwind and we were singing and we were banging along at nearly 30 mile an hour, heading towards John O'Groats, singing and laughing. We were full of it and we made it. You know, photographs at the sign, you know, John O'Groats.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about it is when we went back to the hotel in a place called Wick, we decided we're going to have a big piss up, celebrations. And it wasn't until we had dinner that everyone was that fucked. You know, when you've suddenly stopped, it all suddenly comes down on you, doesn't it? And then you realise how tight, and we had to go to bed early. We didn't have this big piss up, which was a bit of a shame. But if we'd have had to go another day, we would have, because you're focused and ready for it. But because we stopped, the body just went thump, and it's just like, and we almost collapsed. You know, I remember having a couple of beers and I was gone. That was it. That was our piss up. And it was a shame in some ways. In other ways, you know, the accomplishment, we raised £19,500 doing that. And that's what, you know, that's what inspired us and motivated us to keep going. You know, normally, I don't think if it wasn't for the charity, any one of us could have bailed in that ride and just said, no, I'm not doing that. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And it drove us. And that led us on to, I actually, coming out of the back of that Land's End John O'Groats, I actually started to get my legs back and my back improved a bit. And I went on to my training camp in Mallorca in October and I was going okay until I went down a mountain and a car took me out and I went over the side of a mountain. Luckily, I landed on a ledge about 10 foot down on my back on my rocks. I say luckily, there's a 1,000-foot drop.
Ow.
And I broke my scapula, my arm, ruptured my kidney and broke my back. And 6 blokes had to pull me out and get me back up onto the road. My driver had come down the mountain to pick me up, to drive me back to where we were based at the top of the mountain, sat me down and I was like pretty fucked. And I had a coffee and I said, I'm riding back. No, you're not. And the ride back is quite hilly, up and down, then a long descent down. So probably about another 30 miles. I said, I am. And they couldn't stop me. I rode back. I don't know how, because I felt like my hamstring had been pulled off my pelvis. That leg wasn't working. My back was killing me, my shoulder, my arm. But the adrenaline and the driven person that I said that I was doing that. That wasn't me. And in fact, that was actually my chimp who had the right arse. Yeah. And that was driving me to do that. Because my human brain would have said, what the fuck are you doing? Not only are you damaging yourself, if you fall over again, you're going to be, you know. So, yeah, I got back. What I said to them, because my wife was out there, she was in the social group and they'd done a short ride and they were down the bottom of the mountain having coffee. And I said, whatever happened, don't tell Tracy that I've had an accident. But one of the leaders they rung up one of the group leaders that was with Tracy and they let the cat out the bag. And Tracy knew that I was hurt and bad. And it wasn't really until I came home, because I was told to go to hospital and I went twice, but because there was a queue, I said, no, I ain't fucking queuing. And went back to the hotel. Then my wife would send me back again. If you don't go, that's it, I won't talk to you. I went again, and then I got in, and the insurance policy, didn't have my glasses on, nor did the driver. I got the numbers wrong on the insurance policy numbers, and it wasn't going through. And I told them to stick it up their arse. And I said to the driver, just take me back. I've had enough of this shit. And anyway, Tracy was well upset because I should go to hospital. And so we made an agreement. I knew that if I'd been in hospital, to be fair, they'd have kept me in. And I knew that I wouldn't be fit to fly. I'm flying home the next day. So I said, I'm flying home. And she said, on one condition, that you go to A&E as soon as we land. And I said, that's what we'll do. And that's when I got diagnosed with that. And then it went on. It got from bad to worse because because I had a ruptured kidney. I'd had a stone in the kidney that had been laying dormant for 30 odd years, coming in and out. And that popped out when I got back home, and it blocked my kidney. And I'm rolling on the floor, screaming in agony. And I got my granddaughter, 2-year-old granddaughter, next door in the bedroom. And my wife's telling me to be quiet because I'll wake up my granddaughter. And I'm rolling around on the floor with a blocked kidney. So in the end, we had to get a taxi. Was it a taxi or my sister? She put me in a taxi to take, and I'm rolling in the back of the taxi, screaming and yelling. To give it to fair dues, the NHS put me straight into operating theatre, and they lasered the stone and they put a stent in there, and I had to have this stent, kidney stent, that went from the kidney to the bladder, and that was quite painful afterwards. And they didn't get rid of all the fragments. In fact, they damaged the kidney, they damaged the uterus, and they needed to keep the stent in there. And that went from that to what happened next. I had to go back after 6-7 weeks to have the stent removed and get rid of the fragments that were left, which they did. But unfortunately, because the stent was in there so long, I ended up with sepsis and I got this serious infection. So I got these cold shakes, when they septic shock, where you go like this, you're freezing cold, but you're not. You're running. I had a temperature of nearly 40. It's 39.9. And I was freezing cold, and I was trying to wrap myself up, and the nurse was telling me to undress because you need not to get warm because you're already too hot, even though the septic shock. So that was a horrible experience. And the other horrible experience was having to have a catheter bag, walking around with that all day and night, and having a night bag. And I remember once I fell asleep during the day, and I felt this warm thing going, sensation down my leg, and I let it was full up. It was going to burst. And it's the good thing about catheter bags is you can walk outside and undo the tap and just let it go in the garden. You haven't got to go upstairs or anything. But that was horrific. And that is where I am now, because getting over that crash has caused, other problems that I've got now. It actually knocked my heart out of sync, that impact. Which is weird. And it went to the point where it was doing like 28, 29 beats a minute, very low. And so I ended up with a pacemaker, which they got in me. And then I got AF, which is atrial fibrillation. And the pacemaker was interfering with the AF. Instead of the heart jumping around being out of rhythm, the pacemaker was controlling it so that it wouldn't do that. But that upset the heart because it should be an AF. So I was showing weird symptoms. So when I was having an echo, or if I was having an ECG, it was completely normal. But if I was to lift a weight or bend down or go for a walk, and Dr. Nigel knew what was going on. So I'm now waiting for what they call a cardioversion, where they give you a shock. And then I'm going to have my pacemaker reset. And then I've got to have an ablation. Then after that, I'm going to have my back done and have another spinal fusion. And I just get to the point, I say to Tracy, what's next? Because if you look at the back of my book, it says, Tracy's put a quote, I married a fucking drama queen. Although, yes, but to be fair, these are real, illnesses or injuries. But the weird thing about this thing is, although I've been through all these traumatic things and pain, as you get older, men sprout hairs out of their nose and ears, it's an old age thing. I can't bear her. I scream. If she used to pluck hairs out of my nose, I actually scream like a baby, it's crazy after what I've been through. And I can't take that. It's really weird. But this is where I am now. What I've decided, when somebody reaches the age of 60, you become the person you are. Life changes you. I've gone from being a psychopath to a complete irresponsible idiot. She'll say you still are. And heartaches, the death of your parents, even my second wife, even after I left her, she died. All your wrinkles are etched in all your life, and you change, don't you? As you get older, you evolve into someone else.
Yeah, you do.
And I think by the time you get to 60, that's where you are. I think you're done. And like it or not, I doubt if I'd change now, whereas I have, life changes you. So, this is me now. So you see that the teeth, some of the teeth are missing, right? Shall I tell you why that tooth is missing? Right? Now, I was at the
And love you.
Barcelona Olympics, and I got a what do they call it, infection thing. What are they called in your tooth?
Abscess.
Abscess. And in the
Yeah.
Olympic Village, they had a dentist, and I'm pointing there, right? And he said the tooth have got to come out. And this is in Barcelona, so they injected me numb, pulled tooth out. What I didn't know is they pulled the wrong fucking tooth. So he pulled the wrong tooth out. So I didn't know that at the time because I'm still full of anaesthetic. And I remember I hadn't eaten it for a while because of the abscess. And I went down. You got to imagine the Olympic Games when they put on, the restaurant. You've got every cuisine from every country. It's amazing spread, and it's quality food. And all I could think of having, as much as I couldn't eat. I wanted steak, but I couldn't eat. So I had a yogurt. So I got a yogurt and a spoon, and I'm looking for somewhere quiet to sit. And I found some tables over there that were empty because it's full of, like the likes of Linford Christie, Sebastian Coe. They're all there, and I wanted to find somewhere quiet. So I found this table. And bugger me, Boris Becker turns up with all his German tennis players sat all around me. And I'm trying to eat this yogurt and it's all coming out like this. I'm shoveling it in because I got the anaesthetic. My mouth weren't working properly. And Boris Becker was looking at me going, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? His yogurt is all streaming down his face. When that was that. The anaesthetic gradually wore off and I was in pain, so much pain. And I'm going, this is not right. So the closing ceremony was due in a couple of days, and the team manager said, I'll send you home. So he flew me home, and I went straight to the dentist, and they x-rayed it. He said, you've got an abscess. Why is that tooth out? I don't know. I went to the dentist and told him. He said, well, he's taken the wrong tooth out. So I got a bigger gap there because of that bloody Spanish dentist. I think I'm full of scars all over the place, and everyone has a story, even my hamsters. So
Well, it's been like an hour and 45 now, and I don't really want to take up much more of your evening.
Yeah, sorry I've waffled.
No, it's been fantastic. I just don't think my ribs could take any more.
There you go.
I've laughed more tonight than I have done in a long time, so thank you for that.
Pleasure.
And you've given me a lot to think about with this.
That's it.
You really have given me a lot to think about with that, Jim.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So again, I'd like to thank you for coming on and taking the time out of your life to share your stories with us. When I put it out, I'll put links to where your books are and also for the Mallorca training, Mallorca training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if anything comes out of it, if someone comes from, because I do know there's a few guys who were served with who I think they'll really enjoy listening to this because they were big in their bikes. They loved cycling to the point where when I was on a course once. We were getting inspected. Our room was getting inspected, and we had to put photos of our loved ones on our locker so that when the staff came round, they could have a nose. And they ripped into this lad. They said, like, what's this? He goes, it's a photo of me bike. He goes, no, I want photos of your loved ones. And he was just like, he was in all seriousness, that is my loved one.
Yeah.
He was, adamant.
Yeah.
And I suppose it affects people like, But again, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
I wish you all the best in the future with no more injuries. Please don't get on that. Don't get back on the bike.
Done.
So you say.
Yeah.
So you say.
The next time,
I don't think. I think that's quite. Right. Okay. I'll stop the recording there then.
Thank you.
Again, thanks for coming on, mate. I've really enjoyed that.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell. That'd be great because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.
While I was learning hypnosis, we'd do a class and then we'd practice it on each other. And I completely fucked this bloke's brain up because I hypnotized him and told him that he was being chased by a 40-foot vagina that was perioding all over him, right? And he actually, we stayed in touch, and he said, you really have fucked with my brain because he can't get it out of his head. And it's disturbing because he said it's totally weird. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Anyway, that's just my sense of humour. But when I've been working with people under hypnosis, I wouldn't do that. But the rule of thumb is this. If I was to help you, I have to step into your world.